My brother-in-law's truck was parked in front of the house when I pulled up. I sat in my car for a moment, engine still running, and just looked at it. That black pickup. The one with the cracked taillight he'd never bothered to fix. I knew that truck, the way you know the sound of a person you don't like walking into a room. I told myself maybe they were just visiting. Maybe my sister had brought him along to help clean up or move some furniture. Maybe it was nothing. I had driven 4 hours to surprise my parents for their anniversary. I had a key in my pocket, a folder in my bag, and a year and a half of my life in the house behind that truck. I got out of the car. Here's what most people don't know about me. I am not the daughter who calls every Sunday. I am not the one who remembers birthdays without a reminder or shows up at family dinners with a casserole and a smile. My sister is that person. She's always been better at the visible things. The cards, the hugs, the right thing to say at the right moment. I'm the one who works. I got my real estate license at 22, started managing properties at 24, and by the time I was 28, I had enough saved to do something I'd been thinking about for 3 years. My parents had spent their entire marriage in a 2-bedroom house 40 minutes outside of Columbus. My dad worked HVAC for 31 years. My mom did bookkeeping part-time and raised 2 kids and never once complained about the house even though the bathroom tiles had been cracked since 2009 and the kitchen window didn't close all the way in winter. They never asked for anything. That was always the thing about them. They just didn't. Their 40th anniversary was coming up, April. 4 months away when I started looking at lots. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anyone. The property I found was in a small lake community about 90 minutes from Columbus. Close enough that my dad could still see his brother on weekends, far enough that it felt like somewhere else. The lot had been sitting for 2 years. The previous buyer had backed out, and the seller wanted to be done with it. I paid $74,000 for just over half an acre with 112 feet of lakefront. I used a contractor I'd worked with twice before on rental properties. We kept the scope focused. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, an open living space that faced the water, a covered porch, a small dock. Nothing extravagant, but good. Built well, insulated properly with a gas fireplace my mom had mentioned once in passing about 15 years ago, the kind of offhand comment a person makes not knowing someone is listening. I was listening. Total cost came in at $287,000. Land, build, dock, furnishings, the fire pit I added at the end because I could picture my dad out there on a fall evening. I paid for all of it. Savings, a personal loan I took against my own investment property, and 8 months of not spending money on anything I didn't have to. I set up an irrevocable trust with my parents as the sole beneficiaries. I prepaid property taxes through an escrow account. I hired a local property management company to handle any maintenance issues on the standing retainer so my parents would never have to figure out who to call if a pipe froze or a shingle came loose. I had the state attorney review everything twice. I did all of this because I didn't want my parents to feel like they owed me. I didn't want them to think about money when they were sitting on that porch. I wanted them to just be there. I drove up in February to walk through the finished house alone. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked at the lake through the floor-to-ceiling windows and I cried, which I almost never do. And then I drove home and didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. I planned to surprise them in April on the actual day. I told them I was taking them to dinner somewhere special. My mom asked if she needed to dress up. I said just wear something comfortable. I had no idea what I was walking into. My sister's name is not important to this story in the way names usually are. What matters is who she has always been in relation to me, and in relation to our parents, and in relation to the concept of things that belong to other people. She is 4 years older than me. She married young. She was 23. Her husband was 31, which at the time I was too young to think much about. He flipped houses, or said he did. What he actually did was buy properties, underinvest in them, rent them out poorly, and eventually sell at a loss that he somehow always framed as a win. He had opinions about real estate the way people who aren't good at things have opinions about those things. loudly, and without being asked. He had never liked me. I think the specific texture of his dislike had to do with the fact that I actually knew what I was doing. It's hard to explain to someone that you understand property values when you're a woman in her late 20s and they've decided you don't. My sister was not cruel. I want to be clear about that. She wasn't someone who set out to hurt people. She was someone who let things happen, who didn't push back, who found it easier to agree with her husband than to argue. And over the years, that passivity had calcified into something I didn't have a word for until I was standing in that driveway looking at his truck. I hadn't told her about the house. I hadn't told her because I knew that if I did, he would have opinions. He would involve himself. He would make suggestions and then make more suggestions, and eventually the thing I was doing for my parents would somehow become a thing he was part of, and I couldn't have that, so I kept it to myself. And apparently, that was a mistake I couldn't have fully anticipated. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, and the first thing I saw was a mug on the kitchen counter that didn't belong there. Not one of the ones I'd stocked the house with. His. One of those oversized ones with some slogan on the side, sitting on the white quartz counter I had picked out specifically because my mom once said she always wanted a white kitchen. My dad was sitting in the armchair by the window. He looked up when I came in, and something moved across his face that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite shame. It was the look of a man who has been in a situation he doesn't know how to handle and has been waiting for someone to come handle it. My mom was in the kitchen. She turned around when she heard me. She opened her mouth and then closed it. My sister was on the couch. Her husband was standing near the kitchen island with his arms crossed, and he looked at me the way a person looks at someone who has just walked into a room they believe they own. "Hey," he said. Not warm, not surprise, just that. I put my bag down. "What's going on?" My dad started to say something. My brother-in-law talked over him. "We were just having a conversation about the property," he said. "Now that it's in your parents' names, there are some things we need to talk through. As a family." I looked at my sister. She was looking at the floor. "What kind of things?" I said. He reached behind him and picked up a folder. My stomach turned. He had a folder. He had come here with a folder. He had come here with a folder. "The way I see it," he said, "when your parents pass, this property becomes part of the estate, which means it gets divided. Which means we should talk now about how to handle it so there aren't complications later." He said complications, the way people say it when they mean the opposite. When they mean the opposite, when they mean they are the complication, and they know it, and they're daring you to say so. "We've actually been in touch with someone who does short-term rentals on the lake," he continued. "The summer rate on a place like this could bring in $4,000–5,000 a month. Your parents don't need that income right now. The money goes into a shared account. We manage expenses." "Stop," I said. He stopped. The room was very quiet. I could hear the water outside. "That's the thing about lakefront property. You can always hear the water." "You listed it," I said. "Not a question." Something in his face shifted. "We reached out to someone, yes. To explore. You listed my parents' home for rent without asking me, without asking them. They're fine with it." He looked at my parents. Right. My dad's hands were folded in his lap. His knuckles were white. My dad is not someone who raises his voice. He never has been. He's the kind of man who keeps things inside until they are compressed into something very small and very dense. And I watched him sitting there not saying anything, and I understood that he had been sitting there not saying anything for however long they'd been in this house before I arrived. My mom was gripping the counter. "Nobody asked them," I said. "You told them." "Look," he said, and his voice shifted into that reasonable tone, the one that men like him use when they want to sound like the only adult in the room. "This is a significant asset. $300,000 sitting on a lake. It makes sense to think about how it's being used." "It's being used by my parents," I said. "That's what it's for. That is the only thing it is for. But when they're gone." "When they're gone," I said, "it's handled. It's already handled." He looked at me. "This property," I said, "is in an irrevocable trust. My parents are the beneficiaries. They can live here. They can use it. They can enjoy it. They cannot sell it, and nobody can sell it for them, and nobody can sell it for them, and nobody can rent it out of it. When they pass, the trust terms determine what happens, and those terms are already written and already filed, and there is nothing to renegotiate. He stared at me for a moment. Then he said, "That doesn't make sense. If it's in their name, it's not in their name. It's not in their name. It's in the name of the trust. The trust owns the property. My parents have the right to occupy it and use it for the rest of their lives. That's it. That's the whole structure. You can't just—" "I can," I said. "I did. The documents are recorded with the county. I have copies here." I unzipped my bag and pulled out the folder I had carried from Columbus. Not because I had known this would happen, because I had spent 18 months doing this the right way, and doing it the right way meant having documentation. I set the folder on the counter. He didn't reach for it right away. He looked at it like he was deciding whether to believe it. "You did all this," he said slowly, "and you didn't even tell your own family." "I told my family," I said. "I told the people I did it for." My sister finally looked up. Her eyes were red. I didn't know what that meant, whether she was embarrassed, or sorry, or just overwhelmed. I still don't fully know. "I think," I said more quietly now, "that you should go." My brother-in-law's jaw tightened. He looked around the room like he was doing a calculation and didn't like the answer. "We drove 4 hours," he said. "I know you did. This is a family matter." "It is," I said, "and the family it matters to is sitting in this room right now looking very tired. So I'd appreciate it if you would give them some space." He looked at my sister. Some kind of signal passed between them, the kind that long marriages develop, and I watched her stand up from the couch and go to get her coat from the hook by the door. The hook I had picked out, the hook I had installed, the hook that was the right height for my mom, who was 5'3". She stopped next to me on her way out. She didn't say anything at first. Then she said, "I didn't know about the rental thing until we were already here." I didn't say anything back. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded. I don't know if I believed her. I still don't, not entirely. But I nodded. He didn't say anything on the way out. The door closed. His truck started. I stood at the window and watched him back out of the driveway, and then I stood there a little longer until the sound of the engine was gone. My dad got up from the chair. He's not a tall man. He never was. When I was little, I thought he was enormous, the way kids do, and then at some point I grew up and realized he was actually average height and a little bit round in the middle, and that none of that mattered at all. He crossed the room and put his arms around me and didn't say anything for a long time. My mom came from the kitchen and put her hand on my back. We stood like that for a while. "How long were they here?" I asked finally. "Since yesterday afternoon," my dad said. "They said they wanted to see the house. Your sister has a key." He stopped. "I gave her a key. I'm sorry, I didn't think." "It's okay," I said. "It doesn't matter. The locks are being changed tomorrow regardless." I had already texted the property manager on the drive up, just in case. My mom laughed a little at that. It was a short sound, more exhale than laugh, but it was something. I made coffee. My dad sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the water, and the light was coming in low and golden the way it does in April in Ohio. And he just looked at it without talking. After a while he said, "You built this." "I did. The whole thing." "Yeah." He was quiet for another long moment. "The dock too?" "The dock too." He nodded slowly, like he was processing information he hadn't expected to need to process. "I want to sit out there," he said. So we did. The 3 of us went out onto the covered porch, and I brought the coffee, and my mom brought the blanket she'd found folded on the back of the couch. I had put it there, a heavy cotton one, the color of oatmeal, because she runs cold. And we sat there while the lake went from gold to gray to the particular shade of blue that water turns in the early evening when the light is almost gone. My dad didn't say much. He's not someone who says a lot, even when there's a lot to say. But at some point, he reached over and put his hand on top of mine on the armrest, and we stayed like that until my mom said she was hungry, and we went inside to figure out dinner. There's something I want to say about my brother-in-law, and I want to say it clearly. He is not the villain of this story in some clean, cinematic way. He is a man who has always seen the world in terms of angles, every relationship, every situation, every piece of property. He's always looking for where the leverage is. That's just how he operates. And when he walked into that house and saw $300,000 sitting on a lake with two elderly people who were grateful and confused and would not push back, he saw an angle. That's it. That's who he is. My sister chose him. She's made her choices, and they have shaped her, and I have had to grieve that a little over the years. The sister I thought she would be versus the sister she actually became. I don't hate her. I'm not sure I'm even angry anymore. But I changed the locks. And I had a conversation with my parents about what to do if anyone, showed up at that house asking about the property or the rental situation or the estate. I gave them a card with my attorney's name and number on it. I told them that all they had to do was hand that card to whoever was asking and then call me. My mom put the card in her wallet immediately. My dad taped a copy to the inside of the kitchen cabinet above the coffee maker. He said that way he'd see it every morning. I'm not sure if that's practical or if it's something else. Some small act of defiance, a reminder to himself that the space is his and the water outside is his, and nobody can come in here and take that away. I think it might be both. They've been living there full-time since June. My dad calls me every few weeks, usually on Sunday mornings. He doesn't say much in these calls, he never has, but he'll describe what the light looked like that morning, or that a family of geese had taken up residence on the dock and he wasn't sure what to do about them, or that the neighbor 2 lots down had a dog that kept getting into the yard and my mom had started leaving biscuits out for it, which my dad disapproved of on principle but seemed to find funny anyway. Last month, he told me the sunsets in October were unlike anything he'd ever seen. He said it matter-of-factly, the way he says most things, but I knew what he meant. I knew. There's a photograph on my phone that I took the evening of the anniversary. My parents on the porch, my mom's head on my dad's shoulder, both of them looking at the water. I didn't ask them to pose. I just took it from where I was sitting, through the open door. My mom is wearing the gray sweater she's had for a decade. My dad has his coffee mug. The lake is behind them, and it's going that impossible blue. I look at it sometimes when the work week is hard, or when I'm tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. What I've learned, I think, and I didn't go looking for this lesson, it just showed up, is that the people who try to take things are almost never as strong as they think they are. They're counting on you not knowing the rules, or not having done the work, or not having the folder in your bag when you walk through the door. Be the person with the folder. And more than that, be the person who built something so well, so carefully, so completely, that when someone else comes along and tries to claim it, they find there's nothing to claim. The dock is still there. The geese come back most mornings. My father watches the light change on the water and he doesn't have to be anywhere else. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. I've thought a lot about what my brother-in-law was actually counting on that day. Not money, exactly, or not just money. He was counting on me not having done the work. He was counting on the gap between a good intention and a legally defensible structure. He was counting on the fact that most people who do generous things do them emotionally, not carefully, and that emotion without preparation is easy to exploit. He was wrong about me, but he wasn't wrong about how these situations usually go. That's the part I keep coming back to. The people who take things, who show up with their own folders and their reasonable voices and their talk about family assets, they've usually done this before. They know where the soft spots are. They know that love makes people sloppy, that gratitude makes people trusting, that the person who builds something beautiful for someone else is often the last person thinking about what happens when someone tries to take it. I spent 18 months on that house. I spent maybe 3 of those months on the legal structure, and I used to feel slightly embarrassed about that, like it was cold or cynical or not in the spirit of the gift. I don't feel that way anymore. Doing something right is not just the emotional part. It's not just the emotional part. It's not just the intention. It's the follow through, the documentation, the understanding that the world contains people who will look at what you've built and see not the love behind it, but the value in front of it. Protecting the thing you love is not a betrayal of the love. It is part of the love. My dad taped that attorney's card to the inside of the cabinet above the coffee maker. He sees it every morning. I think about that a lot. What that small act says. It says, I understand now that people we trusted were willing to take this from us. It says, I'm not going to let that happen again. It says, my daughter built something solid and I'm going to stand inside it. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom. Those are two completely different things, and it took me a long time to understand the difference. My sister made her choices. Her husband is who he has always been. I can't change either of those things, and I stopped trying to understand them in a way that would make me feel better, because some things don't resolve into something comfortable. Some things just are what they are. What I can control is how prepared I am when those things show up at a door I built. Be kind. Be generous. Do the thing that nobody asked you to do because you saw the need and you had the ability. All of that is worth doing. It's worth everything. And then, go home and call a good estate attorney. Not because people are terrible, but because the ones who are don't announce themselves, and the best thing you can do for the people you love is make sure that when someone tries to take what belongs to them, there's nothing left to take. The lake is still there. My parents are still there. The geese came back. That's the whole story.